Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to the final part of our series of videos focusing on eerie crimes that happened at rest stops. If you haven't seen parts 1 and 2, be sure to check those out first. We'll leave a link in the description below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel. With that out of the way, here is part 3 of 3 eerie crimes that happened at rest stops. In the summer of 1991, everything appeared to be going well for 62-year-old Gord and 59-year-old Jackie McAllister. After 39 years of marriage, the couple from Lindsay, Ontario, were enjoying their long-planned retirement and had recently purchased an RV so that they could travel to Winnipeg for an extended visit with Jackie's relatives. Little did they know that their vacation would soon turn into a nightmare, and that their brand new motorhome would be the scene of a terrifying and heinous crime. Gord and Jackie set off on June 27th, traveling north until they hit Highway 17, which would begin to take them west towards Manitoba. After roughly 6 hours on the road, they had covered a good distance, but it was beginning to get late, so they decided to call it a night. They pulled over at a rest stop near the small town of Blind River, Ontario, roughly halfway between Sudbury and Sault Ste. Marie. The area was secluded and peaceful, with a stand of evergreen trees making the highway barely visible from within. With that, the McAllisters fell asleep for the night. Just before 1 a.m., Gord and Jackie were awoken suddenly to the sounds of someone banging on the door of their RV. It was a man who identified himself as a police officer and said that they needed to move their vehicle. However, when the McAllisters opened the door, they were startled by what they saw. Instead of a police officer, they were met by a man who appeared to be in his 30s, roughly 6 feet tall, and with stringy blonde hair. The man was armed with a .22 caliber rifle and told Jackie and Gord that he was going to rob them. Terrified, the McAllisters did not resist and agreed to hand over their valuables. However, after they did so, it became clear that the unknown man never intended to let them go. The man shot Jackie first, who was killed instantly by her close-range wounds. Gord was shot twice as he ran to escape and was hit once in the back and once in the foot. However, he managed to hide underneath the RV without being spotted by the killer. Around the same time, a 29-year-old man from Elliott Lake named Brian Major made the unfortunate decision to pull off the highway and into the rest stop. Brian stumbled across the murder scene and came face to face with the killer. Unaware of what had happened, he began to exit his vehicle to ask the man if he needed help. By the time he realized what was going on, it was too late. He attempted to flee, but was shot through the windshield of his vehicle. After that, the killer took off. Despite his injuries, Gord managed to make it to the highway where he flagged down passing motorists for help. Sadly, by the time first responders arrived, Jackie and Brian were already dead. Police began to search for the killer immediately, setting up roadblocks within an hour of the shootings taking place. The crime scene itself was also analyzed right away, and at dawn, 30 kilometers of highway ditches were searched for clues, as a helicopter performed an aerial search and divers checked nearby rivers. Though police had very little information to go on other than the description of the killer, they also knew what kind of vehicle he might be driving. Gord had described seeing the man fleeing in what he believed to be a blue van, and a passing motorist at the time had described seeing a similar vehicle speeding out of the rest area and heading towards Sudbury. The description of the blue van was quickly refined, as police informed the public they were searching for a full-size mid-80s model Chevrolet van with white full-size mirrors and white mud flaps. A Canada-wide alert was also put out for the suspect and his vehicle. Unfortunately, police were unable to track down the mysterious perpetrator. As weeks began to pass, attention briefly turned to another brutal crime, when an elderly store owner was stabbed while confronting a thief who had threatened his wife during a robbery in Long Lac. Despite being hundreds of kilometers northwest of Blind River, the two crimes were reported alongside one another for a short time, until police said they did not believe the cases were related. An American tourist from Maryland was quickly arrested and charged in the Long Lac case. From here, reporting on the killings of Jackie McAllister and Brian Major began to slow, with only intermittent pieces of new information being reported. In February of 1992, a computer-generated composite of the suspect in the Blind River killings was released to the public, based on the description of the attacker given by Gord McAllister. There were hopes that the Eerie image would lead to a positive identification, but sadly, as the one-year anniversary of the crime came and went, it was clear that police were no closer to solving the case. A heartbreaking news story released just days before the anniversary detailed how Gord had gone back to work after his retirement became lonely, and how Brian Major's wife Joanne was struggling to raise their young son alone. In a report released around the same time, an investigator said that they were currently digging through a list of 36,000 blue vans registered in the country, as well as more than 1,000 tips they had received about potential suspects. The investigator admitted that it might take a lucky break to catch the perpetrator. In March of 1993, the case was profiled on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, in the hopes that it might generate new leads. Calls flooded in, but sadly, none would lead to the discovery of substantial new information. After that, the case went cold. In 1999, interest in the Blind River killings was renewed, after a 52-year-old former Toronto police officer named Ronald West was charged with the murders of two women. The women were 34-year-old Doreen Morby and 38-year-old Helen Ferguson, nurses who had been killed 2 weeks apart in 1970 when they opened their doors to a strange man. DNA evidence had linked West to the cases, but police believed he might have been involved in other crimes. In 1999, West was already serving an 8-year sentence for a series of robberies he had committed in the Sault Ste. Marie area in 1995. But according to police, there was circumstantial evidence linking him to the 1991 case near Blind River. For starters, West lived in Blind River with his wife and 2 boys at the time of the 1991 killings, meaning that it would have been just a short drive from his home to the rest stop. As a former police officer, it also makes sense that he would have been comfortable using this as a ruse to get the McAllisters to open the door of their RV on the night the crime took place. He also drove a van, which some reports have claimed was blue. However, we were unable to confirm the color in our research. Finally, West's wife allegedly said at one point that the composite of the killer in the Blind River case looked like her husband wearing a wig. Again, though, we were unable to properly source where this claim originated, so take it with a grain of salt. Another reason to remain skeptical about West's potential involvement in the Blind River killings is that given police's interest in him as a suspect, you would think that they would have shown his picture to Gord McAllister to see if he could identify him as the perpetrator. West was never charged in connection with the Blind River case, and perhaps this was one of the reasons why. Maybe Gord was shown the photo and didn't believe he was the suspect, and police simply never released that information to the public. Regardless, West was subsequently convicted of the murders of Doreen Morby and Helen Ferguson and received 2 life sentences. So if he is responsible for the terrifying Blind River killings, at least he remains behind bars to this day. Sadly, Gord McAllister passed away in 2012, without ever discovering who was behind the murder of his wife Jackie. However, we were able to find out that he did remarry several years after the crime, so at least there was some small comfort in knowing that he was able to find love again. Unfortunately, we weren't successful at tracking down what had happened to the family of Brian Major. Hopefully his wife and son are doing well, and one day their family, as well as the McAllisters, will finally get the closure they deserve when this case is finally solved. That brings us to the end of our list. Do you know of any other cases like this that you think we should check out? Tell us about them in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.